The proof of work chain is the solution to the synchronization problem, and to knowing what globally shared views is without having to trust anyone. Satoshi Nakamoto. Welcome back to What is Your Bitcoin Story podcast, where we explore the fascinating journey of individuals who have taken a deep dive down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. I'm your host, Gigi, and today we are thrilled to be joined by the multi-talented Brandon Keys. Our guest today is spearheading Bitcoin education full on, from his insightful newsletter and articles, which can be found on Green Candle Investments, to hosting the popular State of Bitcoin and Macro Insights podcasts. And as of last year, he is one of the members of the Bitcoin Advisor team. This will be an episode filled with educational insights as well as thrilling journeys down the rabbit hole. So sit back, relax, and let's hear Brandon's Bitcoin story unravel. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Gigi, thanks so much for having me, man. Hey, that intro was great, dude. You're making me feel important with all that stuff, dude. So I really appreciate it.
Well, you're definitely important. Don't be hard on yourself. I mean, you're doing a lot of things, which is always praised. And you know, I'm really happy to have a fellow Bitcoiner podcaster on the show, which is actually doing much more than just podcasting, as I mentioned a second ago. But yeah, let's take it back to the beginning, and I'd love to ask you, Brandon, where does your personal story with Bitcoin begin, and how did that come all about?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, I think it kind of started back in. I like to date myself a little bit. So I was a big deal in college. Nah, just kidding. I ran track and cross country in college. So I had a bunch of teammates who coincidentally were over me. So because of that, they all graduated, and coincidentally, we all went to grad schools all across the U.S. So we had the group message going, and I was learning about, basically personal finance and whatnot. So I stumbled upon the We Billionaires podcast with Preston Pish. So I, then, kind of fell down that rabbit hole while I was driving Uber for extra beer money. I traded Bitcoin on Robinhood at that time when you couldn't take it off of an exchange. So not great. And I traded a little
Full
bit of Doge.
CFD experience.
Yep, and I traded a little bit of Dogecoin too. So I did get into the shitcoinery
As we
at
do.
the beginning, right? I did continue to learn while I was in it. That was maybe like 2016 was when I started grad school. So around that time, and then I graduated December 2018, got my first big boy job, and started DCAing, every paycheck then. And by that time, I was, I guess, well versed enough to know not to go into any of the shit coins or anything like that, and kind of just stay Bitcoin only. So luckily, it didn't get too far down that shit coin rabbit hole, but was able to kind of keep it going. And then, I worked the big boy job, and I always felt like there was something more. A couple years into it, and then COVID broke out and whatnot, so I had a little bit more time. So I started Green Candle, and I think like April 21 officially was when I started it with a buddy, and then he got another job and didn't want to keep doing it, but I've been doing it ever since. So here we are today.
Amazing. Well, you made it sound very easy. That your journey was kind of like, listen to Preston Fish's podcast, and COVID hit. Here we are. But yeah, I'm sure there's much more to it. So I wanna ask you. So you mentioned that the Green Candle investments kind of came around during the COVID period, where a lot of us had a lot of time. A lot of us wasted it on binging Netflix and playing PS5. But the other side of people actually started meaningful projects, businesses. So what was kind of that spark for you to kind of launch Green Candle Investments? Was that something that you were always passionate about, kind of sharing insights and investment opportunities, or did someone prompt you onto it? How did that come about?
Yeah, so I've always kind of had this idea. So the way I like to describe Green Candle is like the Barstool Sports of finance. I've always thought that there was there was like kind of like a missing area in financial content, where when I was trying to learn, a lot of people, were either using pretty complex jargon. They weren't really dumbing it down enough. I'm not saying I'm the smartest guy in the world, but I know I'm not dumb, or I know I'm not dumb. So I've got a engineering background, so I think I could pick up things fairly quickly. But when I broke down a lot of these things as I was learning through the podcast and whatnot, it, it was pretty simple topics, right? Like supply and demand, just
Mm,
more convoluted, and they were using bigger words, abbreviations, all that kind of stuff, which just kind of made me more confused opposed to learning it. So I
mm,
was like, well, I could kind of dumb it down. Let me write about it. Because at first, to be honest, I was a little scared to get behind the camera. So I started the blog then, and just kind of, me and one of my former teammates were just like learning out loud, so to speak.
mm.
And so when I was doing that, I was doing the blog and whatnot, and then it was actually my teammate at the time who gave me the push to go behind the camera, and then he had to kind of leave like right around that time I started the podcast. So when I started the pod, he's like, yeah, instead of just doing it by yourself, now you can invite guests on the podcast, kind of talk and get their
Nice.
different views and perspectives, which I'm sure you really enjoy as well. And so that's
Yeah,
kind of been
yeah.
the journey through there. But there's been definitely a lot of ups and downs in the podcasting world, a lot of highs and lows to say the least. Things are starting to trend upwards though, so I'm really excited about where things are going and how they've been going this year. But it's like you said, I probably made it sound easy, and I kind of undercut a lot of the difficult times in there. But it's 2.5 years, and now I'm sitting in front of you here today, right? So it has been a journey to say the very least.
Well, you're making me sound like a big bad podcaster myself. I just turned one. I celebrated my first anniversary of the podcast, so I'm not that big yet, but I'm always looking forward to having other people on and hearing their stories because a lot of people may think that starting a podcast is easy stuff and you just switch on the camera and get chatting, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, and the most important thing with the podcasting world is kind of the consistency and constantly doing it, not just being this one time off, and that takes a lot of dedication, just like all things in life. If you want to start a business, people see other people running businesses and they're thinking, like, oh, that's easy, I'll run my own business. Well, go ahead and try and run your own business. Being your own boss is super hard. You got to be very disciplined. You got to consistently involve, learn, try out new things. But then after all, that the term which I love in Bitcoin, proof of work, like you can apply it to anything that you do yourself. If you put in the work, the proof will be there and the results will come forward. But instead of, looking to monetize something or make big bucks right out the get-go, no, it's not going to happen. Starting a business tomorrow, starting a podcast, maybe starting a shitcoin will happen, but that's morally unethical and I wouldn't advise anyone to do. But yeah, anything good that you want to, grow and dedicate, put in the work and it will reward you. But it's a long, steady journey ahead, as Brandon has just shared himself. But that's the thrill of life, right, Brandon? Because if everything would come easy, then it would be a pretty boring life. But this way, you got to put in the blood, sweat, and tears, and then once the success starts coming, it's so much sweeter, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I was actually talking about this the other day with a friend, and some buddies in Bitcoin actually. Because my parents are entrepreneurs, so they really got to start. I always tell this story about my dad, right? So he kind of took the leap, and he didn't tell my mom. They were just dating at the time. Hey, I quit my job and I'm going for it. I'm gonna basically do exactly what I was doing, but for myself now. And she buckled down and said, okay, how much we need? And she like was ride or die with
Nice.
that. So unfortunately, I don't have a girl that's ride or die with me with that, but I do have Bitcoin, right? So when I first started getting my actual job, I started DCAing into Bitcoin. As I was saying, and so because of that, I was able to invest a good amount of money into myself and into the green candle business. I know people, a lot of Bitcoin maxis would be like, why would you ever spend any Bitcoin? But to me, I'm investing in myself and investing in my future, right? So,
100%.
with everything that's going on, right, the amount of inflation that we're experiencing, and just the difficulty it is to get a business off the ground and kind of keep that grind even in the hard times. I think Bitcoin is
Mm.
something that truly helped me, run Green Candle and get it to the point where it is, right? So, I'm truly grateful I found Bitcoin for that, and kind of allowing me to to explore and figure out some of my dreams and build a business because, I mean, I think everybody in the Bitcoin space can really resonate with the self-sovereign aspect of it, not being tied to a 9 to 5. And,
Yeah.
Bitcoin has actually given me some light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not quite there yet, but I think, fingers crossed by the end of this year, that'll be a reality. Yeah, man. It's just, if I could inspire anybody to go for it, it's just, really just stack for a little bit, just eat it for a little
Yeah.
bit. And then, you'll see that appreciation. And, I've been working for like what, 6 years now. So, like, 3 years almost in the business, or 3 years plus in the green candle business. So, it takes time. So I know in Bitcoin everybody's got the low time preference, but it's pretty when you're in it, right? It's not exactly easy, right? GG, you're in it for a year,
No,
man. I'm
no.
some of those episodes where it's like, you know, especially the early ones, like 5 people listen to it. You're like, what am I doing here? But it
True.
happens. You can see something blossom for sure.
True. No, you brought up some really good points there. I mean, the first one I want to kind of reflect on, which you mentioned, kind of, that saying of, you don't sell your Bitcoin, kind of, Saylor really kind of really advocates for it, but we're not all Michael Saylor sitting on 210,000 Bitcoin. We, if we're lucky, we have that one full coin, and at some points you need to sell, right? Because I mean, like, what's the point of, yeah, I know. Like, you'll pass it on to the kids, and I have kids of my own. Like, I'm gonna pass on the satoshis of course, of what's remaining down to them. I'm not gonna pass everything down to them. And at the end of the day, with Bitcoin, it makes you choose to invest into things that you really kind of want to invest into. And as you said, Brandon, it gives you the opportunity to leave that slavery 9 to 5 job and focus, and gives you the capital and the resources to start something that you're truly passionate about, and can funnel through yourself, and really switch the work into something that you love. I also, from my side, I come from an entrepreneurial family. We have a really long family tree going back. We used to be tradesmen, right? Before entrepreneur term even came around, it was always tradesmen, right? It was buying and selling of goods. And my dad did numerous, like, probably my dad for the last 40 years of his life was just starting businesses, exiting, starting businesses. So he had that entrepreneurial drive. And growing up, he was my idol, and I was always watching like all these businesses that he was turning out. And it always kind of, as I was growing, I was thinking, what do I want to do in life? How to be truly happy. And my dad early on told me, I asked him this question, like, Dad, like, what should I do in life? And he said, son, it doesn't matter what you do in life, but if you do something with love, you don't work a day in your life. And I was like, wow, like, what do you mean you don't work a day in your life? And then once Bitcoin came around, and what I'm doing now, it doesn't really feel like it's work. Like, yeah, there's a lot of hours and effort being sacrificed into it, but it's like pure love that's coming out of it. And and in the long term, I mean, the next 12 months, 24 months, this kind of epoch, I definitely want to join you, Brandon. And I'm sure there's a lot of Bitcoiners around the world that have been waiting for that time, to kind of leave the remaining fiat mine, and go full throttle into the Bitcoin economy, create valuable content, see wherever I can help, and just focus on important things, like focus on making the world a better place, instead of, helping scamming companies scam other people, which most companies, and this very well in the financial world, essentially the whole stock market, if you look at it, or even the money itself, it's a Ponzi scheme. It's relying on, getting debt, paying off the interest, getting the next credit in, getting the next credit in. And I don't like that. And the deeper you get into Bitcoin, and the more you learn about it and the Austrian economics, you realize, like, holy shit, like, we forget the matrix. We live in a very dark, like, corrupt world, and I don't want to give no effort to it. My life is super short, and I want to dedicate it to things that are really meaningful, and make the world a better place.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, the content game is tough, right? I mean, there's a lot of ups and downs. I think you got to realize,
Mm,
like, I mean, it's something about almost like realizing like where you're valuable and where you can bring a lot of value to the world too, right? So, I mean,
mm.
you can love something, but maybe God didn't intend you to do it, right? I mean, like, I don't know if where you're at exactly, Gigi, but I'm 5'6", right? So I'm not a very exactly
I'm a
tall
little bit
guy.
taller. I'm 6'3", just a few
Okay.
inches taller.
Yeah, just a few inches taller, right? I mean, if a girl's listening to this, it's 6 foot on the dating profile, all right? But anyway, anyway, like I'm 5'6", right? So I had to realize, like, all right, God didn't really intend me to be in the NBA, right? I mean, I'm not going to be a
Mm.
professional basketball player, but something I
You
can
could be
do
a
is,
playmaker.
yeah, maybe it would have been the cards were stacked against me. Basically, is the point I'm kind of trying to get across. So
Yeah.
you can really find like what you're passionate about and like what you're good at, and they can coexist, right? They can kind of line up. Maybe it takes you a little bit to find that, and just don't. I think like what we run into a lot, especially like in this day and age, is people beat themselves up about it because maybe they haven't found a place, maybe they harp on the negatives. I think like with
Mm.
everything involved, there's always some sort of positive, some way, shape, or form, some direction, and you'll find your way. So maybe you're not going to build the next breaking lightning wallet, or you're not going to help develop a great exchange or something big, but there's something in the Bitcoin world, if you want to be in it, that you could find, or even you
Mm.
can start a business and just accept Bitcoin, right? I mean, there's a lot of different things. Like everybody has their own
Yep.
kind of skills that they can help and bring together. So, I truly think that at everybody's core, or at least like as it's intended, everybody is an entrepreneur at heart. So I think the
True.
self sovereignty aspect out of it, I think everybody can probably resonate at least a little bit with that, whether it's trying to stack as much Bitcoin and figuring it out for yourself, or figuring out a way to take more control of your life, for sure.
100%. And like on the point of, we're all entrepreneurial deep inside. Um, everybody has something that they would love to do, may it be a product or a service, maybe music, maybe arts, maybe engineering, maybe you name it, right? And now with Bitcoin, it kind of gives you this option and internet to kind of create your digital virtual store and offer it to anybody in this world and get payment directly into your wallet with no intermediate parties, no restrictions, no sanctions, none of that BS, like pure free market, which has never ever existed. Yet we have so many people complaining, oh, the world's so bad. Oh, I don't know what to do. And it's like the prime time to start your own business. Yet people are still discouraged and kind of are too busy, flickering through their phones, their TikToks and Instagrams, instead of, kind of playing their cards right and launching even their Instagram, business. You don't need the website, you can just set up your little store. And before, I don't know if you have any experience with e-commerce, but like a few years ago, I tried to do like a drop shipping thing, and just setting up like merchant and Stripe and everything. And I was based in Europe, and they weren't too friendly with, kind of like there was so many hurdles to do, and then register this whole business to get this payment processor, and then you get a payment through, and then you got to pay the conversion fees, and then if you want to withdraw to your bank, you pay the withdrawal fees, and then it's like there's so many middlemen, like mafia guys in the middle, just taking their chunk for like literally doing nothing. And it's like it was so hard, and let alone someone like, let's say, in the third world country, doing all of that, like they're just gonna give up. They're not gonna go forward with it. But now with Bitcoin, especially, we see what's happening in Africa with Bitcoin. This continent that was for so many centuries being deprived of its full potential, and now Bitcoin is just like it's fire over there. And maybe it doesn't make the headlines on Forbes and the coin telegraphs of the world, but certainly I know a few people, and we had some guests from Africa on the podcast, and it's amazing how Africa is really lighting up and giving a new hope to people that have never even had electricity before, like let alone sound money. Like they were using like crazy stuff, in the year of 2024 to not have electricity. It's pretty insane to me, and it's amazing that Bitcoin is really lighting up the world and making it better, not just through monetary ways, but building these circular economies and giving people an alternative to this fiat Ponzi scheme, which we find as normal, and the reality that we call it.
Yeah, 100%, right? And I mean, like you said, right? I mean, I think people always look at like, oh, put it off, right? Delayed gratification, right? They try to be like, all
Mm.
right, I'll start my business, a week or a month or next year or
Tomorrow,
something.
there's always
Yeah,
tomorrow, right?
exactly, right? But I mean, there's no better time than today, right? I mean, and you gotta start
Correct.
eventually. You gotta, you're probably gonna have to invest some money in it. I think I actually got this from the show The Office, but I don't know. So I don't know how accurate it is. But they say a business doesn't really make money for the first like 5 years it's running, right? So
Mm.
I mean, I'm breaking even now at year like 3. So
So you're
that's
doing
all.
much better than average.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not losing money. Maybe by the end of the year, like I'll lose some money, but by hopefully by next year I'm profitable. So like I said, it's a slow process though. I mean, it's not something that you can, I guess, like kind of get started in and like anticipate, hey, I'm going to be making a full Bitcoin this year on that, right? So I mean, there's a lot
Mm.
of like ups and downs in entrepreneurship. But I mean, like I said too, there's other things that you can do without even starting a business. Maybe you already have a business or you have another skill that you're doing, selling, like maybe you have an Etsy shop or something and you're making
Yeah.
jewelry or doing something little and you want to sell it for Bitcoin. I mean, I know people, like I have a good friend, Jeb, in England, who has like a full on like website that just promotes businesses accepting Bitcoin. And I know, Orange Pill app has the same thing. So, I mean, there's a bunch of
Yeah.
places that'll promote that. So if you've got a business that's completely different and completely outside of the Bitcoin space, you can just simply by accepting Bitcoin, like what do you have to lose? It's so much extra marketing and help with all that stuff. So I think like just being an entrepreneur, like it's not easy. I mean, I like to tell people like I joked about it at the beginning, but I ran like fairly decently high level track. Um, but that was cake being compared to being an entrepreneur, right? So
Yeah.
I could run a race, hate how I did in that race or how I performed, but you know what? Next day you got to move on. Well, this is it's financial stress, it's emotional stress, kind of like ups and downs, waves, all that kind of stuff. So, um, I'm not trying to preface it and say like, hey, it's going to be super easy and everybody, like just jump right in. But I'm trying to also not discourage somebody from being intimidated by the challenge because I think, you save in Bitcoin, you save in the hardest money there is. It'll give yourself an opportunity. And I think, like you said at the beginning, Gigi, if you have something that you truly love, it's not really work, right? I mean, like you and I are
Mm.
doing this on our spare time. I use all my vacation days to go to Bitcoin conferences to connect with other Bitcoiners. Like, I'm doing all those things because that's something I truly love. So, and I don't think you can really like once you find something like that, I think you should just dive right in. And when you dive right in, you have Bitcoin backing you. So, that I think
That's
that's
true.
that's really powerful, right?
Yeah, no, and just to add, so you mentioned the Orange Pill app and accepting Bitcoin as a business. We had a few weeks back, we had Brian the Mint on the podcast. He was actually episode 50, the small milestone in my podcast journey. And we talked about on the episode how actually accepting Bitcoin in your business today is kind of like a cheat code because you can get this hardcore loyalty from Bitcoiners that want to support you. And he mentioned the following day after the podcast that we shot together, he drove through 5 different cities, I believe, in California to get to a barber that accepts Bitcoin. So he like dedicated an hour and a half of his time just to go all the way to that barber who's going to accept Bitcoin, and who he found through the Orange Pill app. And he kind of put his money where his mouth was, saying, other Bitcoiners will, fully support you. So kind of you accepting Bitcoin today for your service or your goods kind of gives you this advantage compared to, he mentioned, if you're a plumber, right? But it could be anything, barber, as I mentioned, or anyone. I don't know, like if you have a party and you want to order a DJ or a barman or something like that, or just entertainment. If you accept, Bitcoin for your service, I'm sure there'll be Bitcoiners in your area or the state next door that will be like, oh my God, like I'll get him just because he accepts Bitcoin. And the fact that he accepts Bitcoin, you feel like it's like a distant relative. It's like, hey man, this is my brother, like I can easily speak to him and connect to him. There's no kind of like, who's this stranger that's going to come over to the house? So, this is something that really gives you an advantage in a super competitive, environment that we call the entrepreneurial market, where everybody's trying to survive, not even like make it big, but get their business through each month. And anything that can help you, why not go for it? And, at the end of the day, you can even incentivize what we call I like to call them pre-coiners. I used to call them no coiners, but I don't think that's like too respectful. We'll call them pre-coiners. If you give them a 10 or 15% discount for your service, may you be a barber or you have a coffee shop or anything like that, and incentivize people to pay in Bitcoin. First of all, to have that experience of getting their first batch of sats, zapping it through Lightning, seeing how fast it is, and then getting a discount for their service. It's kind of a no-brainer. Everybody wants to save a little bit. And for you as a business owner, you can definitely afford to give that 10% or 15% discount, because 1 year later, you're definitely, well, I want to say definitely, nothing in life is guaranteed, right? Apart from death and taxes. Maybe not taxes, but death is definitely guaranteed. But you will be, in the long term, if you're looking at 4-year cycles, you're going to be way better than accepting that same fee in fiat. So I really want to stress to people to start offering Bitcoin as a payment service, because if we want to see this kind of Bitcoin hyper Bitcoinization, it's not going to happen through just stacking and hodling and not building small or medium-sized circular economies. And that doesn't mean you have to live on a full Bitcoin standard, but it just incentivizes to spend to get it going, so people start seeing Bitcoin as actually I can use it for paying for goods and services, instead of just seeing it as a speculative asset class, which people looking from the side, they must be thinking still in the year of 2024 that Brandon and Gigi they're cuckoo guys, putting all this money into magic internet money, hoping it's gonna go up, but it's all a bubble and it's gonna pop. But little do they know, sooner or later, that's why I call them pre-coiners. They're going to be buying those sats. But the one quote that I really like from Saylor is everybody gets Bitcoin at the price that they deserve. So if you want to be an arrogant person and talk it down, and you don't want to dedicate even 10 hours to studying this, probably the most revolutionary technology that has ever existed, and ever will exist in our humanity, then I'm sorry, like, feel free to start DCAing at $10 million a coin. Not a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Essentially, everybody's going to become a Bitcoiner at some point in time. So I like the way you put it, pre-coiners. If we truly believe Bitcoin is going to take over and become the global reserve currency, everybody's a pre-coiner at some point, right? So I think everybody's going
to.
Yeah. I think that's
because if it doesn't, then life is, sorry for my French, it's fucked. Like,
yeah.
Might as well end it today. So, because I don't want to. Well, we know that all fiat goes to zero, right? So, like, if we look at facts, like all paper money goes to zero. Now, what's the next thing going to be? It's going to be either a CBDC or just another version of fiat, where hopefully the Gen Zs will be like, oh no, like, we don't like this fiat, we don't like the CBDC, we don't like being controlled. What's the alternative? Well, it's Bitcoin. There's many other, of course, alternatives, the Bitcoin Cash and whatnot. But I don't want to go down that path. Risk your own funds at your own disposal. But like, Bitcoin is the true freedom money. And I think it's our job to carry on kind of seeding this idea for people to get interested on, through the amazing work that you're doing and everybody else in the space. I truly hope there's going to be more and more, educational content, may that be books, may that be podcasts, may that be online, courses, getting through doing meetups, getting people and kind of, opening their eyes to this new possibility. Because the sooner you get onto this, Bitcoin arc, the better off you and your family will be in the long term. Because it's not looking very fruitful down the normal legacy road. It's looking actually pretty bleak. So hence why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, and like you said, I think that's like kind of the light at the end of the tunnel that we've all seen, right? I think we've all kind of gotten to that place where you look at the world, you just get a little depressed, right? You see like inflation skyrocketing. What the hell can I do? Luckily, we've all found Bitcoin, and I think that's kind of the path that we're all going down. And I think eventually more people are going to be forced to look for something, which is kind of unfortunate, but I think that'll be the push that they need to go and find Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, I think also kind of like with the push also, like, it's, what's that saying? It's better to have an umbrella before it starts raining than looking for an umbrella when it's already raining. That kind of circumstance when it's like, holy shit, like everything, we're going through hyperinflation. What do I do now? It's better to start, discovering a safety plan B aka Bitcoin. Now, while you still can and more or less are comfortable to do so, then before shit really hits the fan and everybody's like panicking and there's like everything's crashing. It's going to be very chaotic and not the best environment to start studying sound money and smoothly transitioning to this. It's going to be like, holy shit, like how do I get this money there? And I think this is one thing. This is where we can plug in your latest addition to the things that you're doing. The Bitcoin Advisor. There's there's other, there's a few other services that do similar thing. But the fact that you're part of the Bitcoin Advisor, I'd love to bring this on and share it with the listeners that you don't have to do everything solo. If you like having your hand held, having someone to ask questions, to support you, to get you through through the hurdles of purchasing your first sats, storing them safely, even like if you're looking long term, and hopefully you are, an inheritance plan. How can you save those sats for your family members and future generations? And all of these things can be helped through companies such as the Bitcoin Advisor. So kind of this leads me to the next question, like how did you come around to joining the Bitcoin Advisor? And maybe you could just in a few words tell our listeners who haven't heard of Bitcoin Advisors the amazing work that you guys are doing there.
Yeah, for sure. So I've had Peter Dunworth on the podcast a couple of times. So Peter's amazing. He's great. If you haven't heard any of his pods, you should definitely check him out. I'm biased.
What Bitcoin did on Peter McCormack, I did listen to him.
Yeah,
Awesome
so
guy.
I mean, I've had him on a couple times too. If anybody could get you bullish, it's Peter. But he's a traditional financial advisor. And has been working in that world for quite some time. So, I do have the macro show. So I kind of saw the synergies between himself and I. We were kind of talking post show and he's like, look, like, if you ever want to come on board, this is kind of what we're doing. And what they do, I think, I'm fully on board with the mission is, they help with a lot of collaborative custody. So they're partnered with Unchained. So basically how it would work, like say, Gigi, you want to come on and be a member of the Bitcoin Advisor, you get a key. The Bitcoin Advisor stores a key, and then Unchained stores a key. We have advisors all over the globe. So no matter what time zone you're in or listening from, we've got somebody that could help you out there. But basically this helps with like estate planning. In the event of your passing, if you don't know if you trust your wife or, your brother, your sister, family members, or whoever you might have to have it, you can go with a company. Which would be a little bit more difficult to kind of corrupt in that way, in that sense. And then, we help you kind of like plan it all out. If you want to give your Bitcoin to a church or do something, some sort of, other kind of foundation or something like that. Oh. Yeah, philanthropy. Yeah, exactly. If you want to do something along those lines, we can definitely help you with that. We kind of offered a bunch of different services, but the reason why, I kind of came on board is because I truly believe in like self-custody and kind of avoiding the counterparty risks. So I do have a toe in like the traditional financial world. So obviously the spot ETFs are a huge hot button topic. And I talk about them a good amount because there's so much money being dumped in. But I stress self-custody because I think that's the true power of Bitcoin, right? Of like, although there's all this money going in, I kind of compare it to gold. If you look at the gold ETFs, it had money flowing in, dumping in, not quite to the extent of the Bitcoin ETFs, of course, but flowing in consistently, except for the past 3 years. There's been negative outflows. But what's been happening in the last 3 years? Central banks have been buying up gold because they realize like all the fiat currencies. So I see that as a potential, whether it's going to be central banks or countries. The ETFs are kind of like an initial touch point, but you, the pleb, you guys should be scooping it up, whether it's with the Bitcoin Advisor. Full disclosure, a couple of my sponsors are Foundation. So they've got a great wallet. You can go to foundation.xyz there or
we had Seth for Privacy and Bitcoin Q&A on the podcast a few months ago. So they're doing amazing work over there. They shared some more.
Great. I mean, they have like sleek, easy to use. Like here's the passport right here. They got sleek, easy to use wallets. I got it and I set up mine within 5 minutes. They even have a concierge service there too to set it up, to help you set it up yourself. So like
exclusive B&Q giving you a 1 hour holding hand journey to get you all set up, which I think for $99 is a bargain.
Yeah.
For saving you a lot of troubles.
100%. So, I mean, there's a lot of great things out there to kind of help you get your Bitcoin off an exchange. There's more products out there too that, outside of what I do and anything else, I just encourage people to really like give that a hard look and thought and, really plan it
Mm.
out, right? I mean, part of Bitcoin and like the beauty, right, of everything that we're kind of talking about, right? Self-sovereignty, it's really becoming your own bank, right? So it's, yeah, how are you going to store your money in the most safe ways possible and avoid any counterparty risk? I think like that's cold storage, and if you want to do some sort of estate planning or anything like that, feel free to reach out to me. There's or if you don't want to work with me or something like that, or you're not in the same time zone, you want to work with somebody from your country, I could definitely send you to somebody else within the Bitcoin advisor. So I think like in my eyes, Bitcoiners, that's kind of like the biggest, are the hardest selling point. At least it was for my parents and other people that I've interacted with. They're like, why don't I just hold it on Coinbase, or something along those lines? And I'm trying to sway them this way. So that's why I've gotten so many. That I've kind of partnered with some companies that'll allow me to help spread that message to the right people for sure.
Nice. Nice. No, I totally agree. The topic of, what are they called? Oh my god. It's, as I mentioned, it's late on my end. The
Yeah,
ETFs. It's
yeah,
kind of, it's a bit, it's a bittersweet feeling, because on one hand, yeah, there's so much money flowing in and everyone's like, oh, like I can trade it now. But then on the other hand, you're like buying essentially an IOU for Bitcoin. And still, you're definitely much more in the loop about this, but I think there's only been one or two brokers that have actually disclosed their public address. So, like, definitely BlackRock. Nobody actually sees their ledger or what they're actually keeping and what's in Coinbase and what's not, which, if we look at the history of these financial companies, like, they're mega crooks. Like, talking about big crook companies, these guys are like the guys who invented the rules, essentially, the Madoffs of the world. And like, I wouldn't trust them like a zero bit, giving them any money, let alone, buying Bitcoin from them. So like, I have a feeling that like there's only going to be this window where there's going to be all this money coming in, but sooner or later, like some big boy will, kind of the sheets will come down, and the emperor will be standing butt naked, and there's kind of going to be this panic for what you're talking about, self custody, because big companies and big institutions and the big boys will be like, holy shit, like we've been thinking all this money, all these Bitcoins with them, but then it's actually not. Hypothetically, this could be totally wrong. Maybe, they do everything by the books, which I find it very hard to believe that these big boy companies are doing everything by the books. But, hopefully I'm wrong. But, just deep down inside of me, I'm like, holy shit, like these guys have been scamming the markets for like so many centuries. Now they're like, ooh, this Bitcoin, which for the big part, maybe Larry Fink, but who knows, maybe even he doesn't really see the true potential of Bitcoin and what it actually means. He's just like, oh, I can make, money on this. Fantastic. Let's go. Let's sell it. But yeah, what is your personal thoughts on that, Brandon, since you kind of cover it much deeper on that topic?
Yeah. So I mean, like, of course, like I don't think you should trust any of the ETFs to kind of go through it. But I think it's like three or four of them have disclosed their wallets. Maybe it's Bitwise and then Arc, maybe one
Yeah,
more. I can't
Bitwise.
remember off
Okay.
the top of my head. But BlackRock hasn't, right? I mean, I think it's a little bit harder for a ETF to not fully buy the Bitcoin as they're saying, right? But
Hmm.
we also got the SEC tracking this, and personally, I don't think the SEC is sophisticated enough to have like forensic accountants to track all of this, because it's very new too, right? So I mean, although
Yeah.
the US is like, we just launched ETFs, there's been ETFs launched around the globe prior. So I mean, I think
Hmm.
it's going to be like a learning process. I think in the last cycle we saw a lot of paper Bitcoin being bought, and FTX and Celsius and all these other ones that ended up collapsing. Now, I don't think it's going to
Hmm.
be quite to the extent of paper Bitcoin being purchased from the ETFs, but you never know, right? I mean, you could have such high demand where the ETFs like buy up all the Bitcoin from an exchange, and then Bitcoin is
Market
not.
squeezing coming, Brandon. Get ready. Moon
Yeah,
coming.
I
How
mean,
many
I
times do you
wouldn't.
get that question? When moon, Brandon? It's
Yeah,
like, wait, it's
exactly.
coming.
I get that all the time. To be honest, like I do think like I talked to a lot of people. This cycle is very different, right? I mean, we don't have as much Bitcoin on the exchange. We've gotten a few little initial bumps, like from the Germany
Yeah.
seizure, kind of selling that off
Yeah.
to exchanges, and
Well,
then
that's old
now,
news now. Their account zero. So now we've got the empty gox looming, right? With just earlier
yep,
today, I was reading right before jumping on the podcast, $6 billion, 90,000 Bitcoin moving to an unknown address, and everyone's like, "Oh, big nip coming." But it was
yeah,
crazy with Germany. Going back to Germany, like they've sold off over 50,000 Bitcoin, and like price like came down to 57, 58,000, and then here we are today, like not even a week later, back at 65. Like it's nice to see that people aren't like panic selling and like, oh my god, like it's going down, it's gonna crash. It's the bumps are kind of getting swollen in now,
yeah.
sucked in, not swollen in.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think, from all that, right? I mean, I think everybody knows like the true, like, kind of, uh I guess, or not capabilities, but the true, like, reasoning why they're getting into Bitcoin. But I mean, if you look at the
Mm,
ETFs too, like, it's a few people buying a lot of it, right? It's not a lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
people kind of getting into it still. So there's still like kind of low adoption. I think from like the pleb standpoint, it's just like the people with the bigger money are like kind of realizing it, which is good and bad,
Mm,
right? I mean, it's going to be a lot more money being dumped in, but like I said, I think a lot of the Bitcoin on exchanges is getting scooped up by these ETFs. And what's going to happen when all that is gone? Like, there's only going to be so much mined a day. So is that either going to shoot up?
450 a day for the whole world. Can you imagine 450 Bitcoin a day, Brandon, in 24 hours? And like how much demand, especially just for like Wall Street alone, for trying to facilitate their clients' needs, and then the average pleb trying to buy, 10,000 sats. How much do I
Yeah,
need to pay?
yeah.
Crazy.
I mean, BlackRock had it in a single day. Purchase their ETF alone purchased over 10,000 Bitcoin in one single day.
Yeah,
So I mean, like,
yeah.
you never know what's going to happen with all this. Obviously we've had, yeah, like we said, the Mount Gox, Germany dumping as well. Like a lot of these, like, kind of one-off things, like those one-off things are going to end soon, right? So the
Mm,
miners are either going to be, either pushing heavy to sell, to kind of keep it down, or they're going to be hodling like they've been doing, and
yeah.
then that's gonna send it off. And I think the interesting thing about Bitcoin now is, like, no matter who you are, where you've got your money, you have access to Bitcoin in some way, shape, or form. Whether that's like a pension fund, a retirement fund, all these different kind of
True.
tools and avenues with all the things that we have now, where the fixed supply, like, who knows what the SEC kind of does. Like, maybe BlackRock goes to the SEC and says there's such high demand for this. Unfortunately, we can't purchase enough Bitcoin because of the fixed supply, so we can't. But we don't want to turn it off um, from our whatever, from our clients.
Service
So maybe
offering.
we, yeah, so maybe we just buy some paper Bitcoin and we say we plan on buying this amount every single day for the future or something like that. Like, I wouldn't be
Hmm.
surprised something like that rolls out in the next, like, year or so, with the way that these ETFs are going, because especially when we see like the price go up, man, we haven't seen this kind of money that has the ability to FOMO in quite like we have with traditional Wall Street, kind of being in on Bitcoin now. So I think, this cycle, like they've said it every cycle, right? It's going to be different. I think
This
this
time it's
one,
really going to be different.
yeah, I mean, it's just because of the amount of money that's, going to be there, right? And who knows what's going to happen in the US economy, right? I mean, we've tightened interest
Mm,
rates for such a long period of time and kept things like very high. And Powell has kind of anticipated something to break. Nothing has yet. So, say they decide to keep interest rates high for a long time, too long, something does break, and then they start to print more money too. Or hell, Trump is going to the Bitcoin conference here in a week and a half. From this recording, there's rumors that he's going to announce that he's going to, try to use Bitcoin to help pay off the U.S. debt. So who knows what the hell's going to happen? And like, I don't think all this stuff is quite priced in at this point.
No, for sure. And I think a lot of people, like how I really try to embed it into people's minds, that the pre-coiners, I mean, you know, the fact that Bitcoin is the first ever asset class that has a scarce, is super scarce. Like there's only a limited 21 Bitcoin that of course you can subdivide, and then people go, but how can an economy work on 21 Bitcoin? Well, and then I break it down to 100 million sats in one Bitcoin, so overall it's 2.1 quadrillion units, and the world can very easily sustain itself of 2.1 quadrillion units. But the most important thing is that people cannot wrap their heads around a scarce asset that has a limited supply. And the fact that it's digital, where the copy paste of everybody thinks everything online can be duplicated, and there's so many other tokens. Why is Bitcoin so special? But like the fact that it's so limited, and what you mentioned, Brandon, I'm sure BlackRock, if it carries on getting a huge demand, and there is a market squeeze, and there is no more Bitcoin like to facilitate these trades, they're going to be definitely doing some stuff to try and facilitate, and like kind of doing their own future selling of like Bitcoin, which is to be acquired. But yeah, that at the same time, it's going to be felt ridiculously on the price of Bitcoin, which I hope it doesn't happen too soon, because yeah, everybody says they love moon days, but I like my, normal average monthly DCA. I don't want to be DCAing in at 1 million just yet, right? And I'm sure you don't either, Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I get a little anxious when I see the price shoot up a bunch in a short period of time, especially
I
because
didn't buy enough.
yeah, exactly. I don't have enough, or I use Bitcoin to pay somebody that's helping me out in Green Candle, and I like see the price goes up, and I freak out a little bit, like, oh shit, like I
Mm,
missed an opportunity to get a little bit better of deal. But like I think in the end, it always comes back around. So like you said, you
true.
get your Bitcoin at the price you deserve, and I think whether that's creating value or whatever, like you find your niche and kind of get back in there. No matter what everybody's doing, as long as you focus on what you're doing, you'll be all right. I always joke around that in school I learned one thing from my teachers, and that's to keep my eyes on my own paper, right? So keep your eyes on
Nice.
your eyes whatever you're working on and building, right? I mean, obviously paper is the fiat stack, but theoretically, right? Keep your eyes on your own
True.
Bitcoin too, right?
Or to say it better, keep your laser eyes. Those laser beams are there for a reason. Not just symbolizing 100K, but laser focus on what you're doing, and excel at it.
100%.
Awesome,
Yeah.
Brandon. I wanna bring up one more topic, and one last question to kind of, because we went to many different aspects of Bitcoin, but this one, I think it's really important to bring up, and going forward, I want to bring it up with every guest that I have on the show, and I think it's something really important that needs to be discussed in the space, and that is privacy. There's been a lot of changes, and big things have happened in the last few months, which people kind of just, and I'm speaking specifically about the Samurai case, and the Whirlpool going down, which was kind of big headline news for a week or two, and then it went under the rug, and we were talking about Bum Check, Breedlove's misses, which, and then since then, just like bam, like nobody's talking Samurai anymore, and I really want to bring it up to people that privacy on Bitcoin is a super crucial thing, and the more that we see regulated entities coming in, and the Chainalysis of the world really sucking out all the data, all the transactions happening, and so many people buying their Bitcoin on KYC exchanges, and not even thinking about that their transactions are publicly broadcasted, and every node runner, or not even a node runner, anyone checking the Explorer can see all the transactions. How do you, and I don't know if you get these questions at the Bitcoin advisory from your clients, but like how do you approach privacy at the moment, now that kind of coin mixing has become a much harder thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely making it a lot more difficult, right? So, I always kind of say like that's where you're kind of like your local communities come really big. You can go peer to peer. I encourage everybody to go to a meetup. You can find one in your area, right? You said the Orange Pill app. It's a great place to kind of figure
Mm,
that out. You can go to meetup.com. You can figure out somebody else in your local community who has Bitcoin and trade it for their services, or vice versa, and you can use a non KYC wallet for that. But it is interesting, like you're saying. Like I think, just from a global or like a higher up perspective, I think the U.S. does not hate Bitcoin, despite what a lot of people on Twitter will say. I think they actually really like
mm,
Bitcoin. I think that they really like Bitcoin, but they want to know what you're doing with it so they could tax the shit out of you. So so that's why I think they're attacking these non KYC wallets, right? So I think like you got to be cautious with all of that. You got to figure out a way to kind of get everything more private. I think the way to go is more like peer to peer transactions, and that's what Bitcoin was truly designed to be, right? It's a digital peer to peer electronic cash system. So
It
use
was
it
the
as
first line
such.
of the white paper, peer-to-peer
Exactly.
cash system, right?
Yep. So use it as such, right? I mean, like pay your friend, pay your neighbor to mow your lawn in Bitcoin, or, hey, I'll clean your house for Bitcoin, or, do something along those lines to kind of help get that. And then you can get yourself either like, a non KYC Lightning. I know that there's like Mutiny, Alby, like there's all these other ones out there that you can get. You can use, your cold storage to kind of utilize that. I would say kind of keep the stack separate. There's a lot of great resources out there how to get non KYC Bitcoin. I know there's one of my buddies, Hedy Walk, on. He's in California, I believe, but he goes to the lengths of utilizing a burner phone that he buys in cash, and then creates a fake email and does all that to do it. So I mean, there's ways around it, right? I mean, you just have to be willing to
It's
put
just
in the
how
work.
hard you want to go,
Exactly,
how deep
right?
you want to go.
Yeah, exactly. So I think like I said, there's positives and negatives to both sides, and I think you just got to be more personally responsible and just kind of figure it out that way. So um, I think the way I talk to people about it is like it should be a focus of yours, because you know there is some fear aspect of it where they did attack Samurai and the Whirlpool guys, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they do actually hate Bitcoin and they really do want to come at you just for owning it. But my theory is
Hmm.
is more so they don't necessarily hate it. They just want to. They're not embracing it yet
They
because they
want to
want to
know.
tap. Yeah, they want to know everything, right? And what's the best way to know, right? I mean, it is a ledger, right? I mean, they see every time you move your Bitcoin. So
Sure.
I don't think they're quite sophisticated enough to be there yet, but I think that time is coming, unfortunately. So, or fortunately, the way depending on how you look at it, right? I mean, if Bitcoin wasn't able to survive this, right? If Bitcoin wasn't able to survive this, it was never truly meant to be the global, peer to peer electronic cash system of the world, right? And I think that it's just
True.
this is kind of one step in it. It's the now they fight us kind of aspect of it. So we'll see how strong they fight us. Maybe we got Trump speaking at the Bitcoin conference, and recently bringing on a VP who's very Bitcoin
Yeah.
and crypto friendly, as much as that irks me to say that. But I mean, you got to take the good with the bad at some point, right? So
True.
I think it's moving in a positive direction, and I think like as long as we as Bitcoiners keep innovating, right? Like we keep voting with our feet, and like eventually we'll be able to keep voting with our dollars/Bitcoin, right? I mean, once we start doing that, it's already a talking point in the 2024 U.S. election. Like it's a small one. It wasn't brought
Every
up on the
candidate is talking about it.
yeah, it wasn't
Well,
brought
apart
up in
from Biden. But Biden
yeah,
doesn't even know what he had for lunch. Like that guy,
yeah.
bless his soul, he's totally lost. But like every candidate is speaking about Bitcoin, which is pretty fascinating, right?
It's insane, right? I mean, if you would have told me when I got into Bitcoin, like whatever, when I first heard about it or was learning about it in like 16, 17, 18 time, like 6 to 8 years ago, I would have been like, you're crazy, man. This is some like, internet money thing. But then we've had COVID break out. We've had a lot of like acceleratory events happen. And I think, with all that being said, it's just a matter of time. And all these things, it's like the writing is on the wall, right? So, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know if we're really going to be the suddenly, and like Parker Lewis describes it, and we're going to be into a full Bitcoin standard soon. But I think like we're getting there to the point where there is going to be some discussion as to what a country's Bitcoin strategy is and what a business's Bitcoin strategy is. Because if you don't have one as a country or a business, then you're going to be falling behind. So I think that
True.
these next 4 years are going to be very interesting. The next epoch, are a lot of big things are going to happen and change. And yeah, man, I mean, I'm so excited for what's ahead.
Me too. Likewise, brother. And I also close up the episode with every guest, asking like, what's one piece of advice you would leave the listeners? I mean, you dropped so many, bombs on them, but I guess I'll answer it for you, and that is start stacking now before it's too late, because whatever price you get in, even today, if it's 65,000, you might be thinking, oh my God, it's so expensive. From my past experiences, even people like the OGs that got in like a decade ago, that were buying Bitcoin at $200, they thought it was expensive. They were like, this was only like less than $1, like a few months ago, and now it's $200. So don't be focusing on the price. Just focus on stacking your DCA, your sats, keeping them in cold storage. What do you think, Brandon? Is that good advice, or would you add some more to the pre-coiners?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's great advice, man. I think, that exactly, you nailed it on the head. Just keep buying, just keep stacking DCA. It's the easiest way to get in. Don't worry about trying to time the market or anything like that. Just have like a longer outlook on things, right? I mean, as Michael Saylor says, if you've held Bitcoin for longer than 5 years, you've never lost a money in your life, because it's in dollar terms, it's always going to go up, right? They're going to keep devaluing the underlying currency. If you're worried about the volatility of Bitcoin, it's not the volatility of Bitcoin, because we know exactly what's being pumped out into the market every single day. It's the volatility of the underlying currency, which is the dollar. So, I think just kind of switching that mindset from there, and kind of just, it's very freeing. And I think, once you can kind of convert over and quit looking at the price every single day. I mean, I did it 100% when I was first, getting into it. Right. So, I don't blame anybody for doing that right away, but like I said, just being able to kind of just take things as they come, it's very freeing in all aspects of life.
Very true. Well, there you have it, guys. I would love to have you back on the show in the future, Brandon, because as I always say, our Bitcoin journeys are only getting started. There's always going to be a lot more exciting things to discuss. I'm really fortunate and happy that the person who got us connected made that connection, and I'm looking forward to having you back in the future. Last question, where can we send our listeners who want to get in touch? I guess the Bitcoin Advisor is one of them, but where else can we send our listeners? I'll definitely include it in the show notes, but those guys that are too lazy to check the show notes, I just want to listen to it, where do they go, Brandon?
100%. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'll definitely come on whenever you want me. So feel free to shoot me a DM or whatnot. But yeah, Green Candle IT. Green Candle was taken on all social media platforms. So they're on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm mostly active on X, Twitter. You can follow me personally too, bkeys1010 on Twitter, and then keys_open_doors on Instagram, if those are two of your fortes. And then YouTube, you could search Green Candle, State of Bitcoin podcast, or Macro Insights podcast, wherever you get podcasts. So feel free to reach out. I'm pretty open, and I think you'll be able to find me on any of those places. So yeah, man, Gigi, thanks so much. You're doing an outstanding job. And if you guys aren't subscribed to this show yet, smash that subscribe button. Send Gigi some sats. My man is killing it. So man, thanks for all that you do.
Thanks a lot, Brandon. Said like a true podcaster yourself, and yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm really putting it in. It's only been 1 year, and we crossed just last week we crossed the 50 episode mark. But I'm dedicated to pushing out. There's a lot more Bitcoin stories to be told, a lot more insights to be shared with the world. So thanks a lot for the kind words. It really inspires me to carry on what I'm doing and know that I'm on the right track. So. Thanks again for everyone that's listening. Make sure to clock in next week. And until next time, Brandon.
Until next time, appreciate it, Gigi.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, I would highly appreciate it if you could boost, rate, review, and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. It would greatly help us spread these incredible stories and the message of Bitcoin freedom. Also, feel free to reach out to me and follow our social media accounts on X, Nostr, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. I appreciate all of your support, and make sure to tune in next Thursday for the next episode. Thanks for listening, and remember to stack sats and stay humble.